I'm going to do this talk. I'm going to talk for about, as I say, 40 minutes, then I'm going to fuck off. And I can guarantee you will enjoy at least one of those two things. It is a great pleasure for me to share this research with you. I wanted to take the privilege of this attention to formally thank Martha and all the work that she's doing to keep this community alive. It's not taken for read that these types of communities can exist. These substances and these practices have often been illegal. At the moment, we have the freedom to do this. And I feel very lucky and very proud to live in a city where we can have this conversation. I'd like this conversation to be available to even more people than it is. But I just want to recognise the work that Martha is doing in campaigning for the safe use of these substances and bringing people together. So round of applause for Martha, please, because she's a in the midst of a housing crisis and pending homelessness and everything else that's going on for her and everyone else. So, so this talk is about psychedelics and the imaginal. Originally it was going to be about psychedelics and art, and then I'm like, as I was researching it, I'm like, I don't want to talk about art. I think there's something bigger in the room. And then I started to think, well, actually, I don't think I want it to be about psychedelics either, because there's something bigger than psychedelics. And that is the psyche. So I'm going to talk about existence, and I'm going to talk about the psyche, capital P, and I'm going to do so in an artistic way, because that's what I'm qualified to do as a performing artist, right? I'm a poet, and for many years I've been kind of interfacing between the psychedelic tradition and the poetic tradition, and I'm going to be talking about the imaginal realm. Some of you have an understanding, or maybe a bit of an understanding of that term. It's a bit obscure. It's kind of like a philosophical concept. I'm going to get onto that in a minute and go into that idea of the imaginal realm. Trigger warning: I'm going to get proper woo. Yeah, I'm going to wax poetic about mushrooms, trees, flowers, and springtime. And I'm going to use loads of wanky words, just so you're aware. So before we go on, I want to also just recognise the historic moment that we're here together in, right? We're living through what John Vervaeke calls a meaning crisis. And he says that the mental health epidemic and the loneliness epidemic at its core is a crisis of meaning. And there's an emptiness to a society which is systematically contaminated and contaminating itself with bullshit. Bullshit that is not good, true, or beautiful. Okay, and this is what I call. I always think the society that we live in is chronically and pathologically disenchanted. And what I mean by and actually re-enchantment is a governing principle of my life's work as an artist. And I'm putting together a whole educational program called Technicians, and this is not a plug, by the way, but this is just me sharing my passion, Technicians of Re-enchantment, because I think ecological desecration and ecological depletion is an act of disenchantment. And this is not just about depleting and disenchanting the natural world, it's also depleting our imagination, our participation in beauty. John Vervaeke talks about the degradation of our imaginative faculties, okay? John O'Donoghue, an awful lot of our time, this is a poet, one of my favourite poets, John O'Donoghue, an awful lot of our time we spend these days in our lives are in places we don't want to be, doing things we don't want to do, and sometimes with coarseness and vulgarity. Anyone ever had a job with coarseness and vulgarity? Lots of bullshit in our lives, and enclosure and capitalism and commercialism, all the things which have taken us away from the bosom and the connective tissue of community and land and our free time, is an act of desecration, an act of disenchantment. So the modern psyche is mediated and it's processed by all these machines and all these apps, right? And it's kind of like a hall of mirrors, which it feels often very claustrophobic because it's very human to human to human to human. So we've lost that connection to the more than human world because of the world that we're living in, and this enclosure has taken us away from the foliage of the mysterium, a beautiful word used by the poet Kathleen Rain, the mysterium, capital M. We are overtasked, we're underpoemed, our imaginal health is depleted and contaminated by a clamorous insistence on pop-ups and notifications and messaging apps, which is harvesting our psyche, harvesting our attentional resources, and in doing so is colonising the voice in our heads and colonising our psyche. This is especially disturbing for young people, and colonising the imaginal realm. I used to work as a spoken word educator in secondary schools and primary schools, and I remember one particular moment, especially when there was a kid at the back and he couldn't think of anything to write. We were doing a writing exercise. He couldn't think of anything to write, and I said, "What's up?" He said, I have no imagination. And I said, "Why do you feel like that?" He said, "I've watched too much TV. It's taken away my imagination." He wasn't trying to get out of work. He was having a realization, and it was a really dark, quite disturbing moment, but one that I found quite illuminating. So this hyper-stimulating, this digital cacophony doesn't leave a huge amount of room for self-initiated play. Mm-hmm. It doesn't leave much room for the imaginary engagement with books, woods, silence, and the voices in our heads. So that's all the really dark stuff. Some good news, we're living also through a psychedelic renaissance. Hey, this is why we're here. The psychedelic renaissance is taking place. Why is it taking place? Well, I mean, I'm going to break it down, the psychedelic renaissance. It's got kind of different branches which are becoming more developed as we go through. We've got recreational use, okay? Drugs for fun, great, love that. Medical use, we all know what that is. We've also got performance-enhancing use of psychedelics. So these are microdosing regimes which have become quite fashionable, for example, in Silicon Valley. So performance-enhancing use, and this has correlates with the way that things like meditation has been used to brainwash kamikaze pilots, in my eyes. I'm quite critical of that whole world. As somebody who used to be a mental health resilience trainer and used to teach in corporate environments, I've become very jaded by that whole world. And I think there's a real risk with the psychedelic renaissance that it ends up being channeled into a repertoire of wellness products for a market which is taking entheogenic substances and traditions and practices of wisdom and indigenous traditions and deracinating them, uprooting them from their ecosystem and applying them or misapplying them to for the intention of sustainable performance, or the reduction of worker absenteeism. This is not to say that people who work in the private sector don't deserve access to wellness activities, but my concern is this, right? Often these entities, these corporations, are pathologically bent on maximising shareholder profit at any cost. At any cost. So is the psychedelic renaissance being used to put a bandage on a limb that should really be severed? It should really be cut off. That's the question. That's kind of like one of the things I'd like to explore with this talk, right? Because psychedelics are about rupture, and they dehabituate cognition. They take away the habituated nature of and they disrupt, and they bring plasticity, and they repattern. They disrupt the default mode of cognition and connectivity. So really, psychedelics are about re-engineering, or they can be about re-engineering consciousness itself, and I think that is what we should be going for. That brings me on to the fourth use of psychedelics, which is mystical inquiry. So we've got recreation, medical use, performance-enhancing drugs, and the fourth one, mystical inquiry. Mystical is one of those quite inaccessible words. It's related to mysterious. It's an engagement with the ever-receding horizon of the beyond, the mysterium, right? It's about blurring selfhood, going into unitive states of oneness, right? So what do we want to do with the Roaring Twenties? What do we want to do in this age of disenchantment? What is the end of psychedelics? I don't have the answer to that, but I will be arguing for psychedelics as a tool of philosophical inquiry and a tool to navigate the imaginal realm, and a tool to tackle the meaning crisis that we're in. The meaning crisis, just to expand on that a little bit, is related to the breakdown of religious narratives, the breakdown of narratives that connect us to ourselves, our history, and also our future, and a way to navigate all of this uncertainty, and a breakdown of the wisdom traditions that bind us to ourselves and to our ecology and to the cosmos. That's part of what the meaning crisis is, and I think that mystical inquiry can help with that. So I'm going to introduce now the Imaginal, because it is quite an obscure word, and it's got kind of different bits to it, because it's related to the imagination, and I'm going to use that word sometimes interchangeably, imaginal, because the word imaginal encompasses and exceeds the imagination, right? It's also a philosophical category, and I'll come on to that in a minute. You've got mundane, everyday imaginal activities. That is the voice in your head, a symbol, an idea, a concept. You can't touch them, you can't feel them, you can't physically locate those things. They exist in ideas space, okay? So if you've ever thought anything, then you're participating essentially in the imaginal realm already. If you've ever used language, figurative language, similes, metaphors, images, or if you use any language at all, you are participating in the imaginal realm already. So it's a very mundane and everyday thing. Rob Babaya, who is my Buddhist teacher, who was mentioned by Xander earlier on, says that whenever there is perception, there is images, fabrication, memories, concepts, projections, and stories. Okay, so it's impossible not to conceive without all of the imaginal realm contaminating it and embellishing it and projecting into it. Okay, with our memories, etc., etc., etc. By the way, I want to celebrate the fact that Xander is here. Many of you may not know Xander. He did talk here right at the beginning, about 2 years ago. But Xander this week found out that he got the results of his cancer treatment, and he's cancer free. So not tree, because we're going to have a round of applause for Xander. And I forgot to say that this talk I'm dedicating to you, Xander, and may this be a celebration of life, and may each day going forward be a celebration of life. Really, really happy. Can anybody talking of life? Can anybody sort me out with some water? Thank you very much. So we've got mundane. So we've got mundane imaginal. We've also got sacred imaginal. The idea that the imagination is a principle of creation. It's a principle of the cosmos. Coleridge talked about the primary imagination, right? So, and he actually had a beautiful definition of that. A repetition in the finite mind of the eternal act of creation in the infinite I am. Thank you. A repetition in the finite mind of the eternal act of creation in the infinite I am. Okay, so the sacred imaginal is immaterial, it's ideational, it's also not fantasy. It's different to fantasy. It's very, very real. For example, a myth is very, very real. You feel that story. It has a poetic truth, even though it's a myth, right? In the words of the Roman philosopher Sallustius, myths are things that never happened but always are. Myths are things that never happened but always are. Also, you could look at poetry in the same way. Emily Dickinson talked about poetry. She said, "Tell the truth, but tell it slant. Tell the truth, but tell it slant." There is a poetic truth to the sacred imaginal. When we're talking about the sacred imaginal, we're getting into soulcraft. We're getting into images that have particular resonance, particular poetic, symbolic resonance that go beyond mere fantasy. Okay. Maybe an archetypal image. symbolic material from a dream. All of you, I'm sure, are intentionally participating in the sacred imaginal already. If you've ever done Qigong with all of its different birds and animals and postures, if you've ever done yoga, prayer, visions, mantra, therapy, art, tarot, visualizations, that exercise we did at the beginning, metta, loving kindness, gratitude, hypnosis, music, internal family systems. If you've ever written down a dream, you are intentionally engaging with soulful, resonant, archetypal images for the purpose of the good, what Plato called the good, the true, and the beautiful. Maybe there's a longing in all of us to participate in the good, the true, and the beautiful through the imaginal realm. Again, John O'Donoghue, excuse me if there are any Irish citizens in the house. In order not to let the tender tissue of your sensibility and your imagination become coarsened or numbed, we need to visit some beautiful things that we have within us. There is an amazing region within you that is divine, and nothing that has ever happened to you has tarnished or damaged it. So he talks about this chapel inside of us. He talks about this sanctuary inside of us where we can be renewed and where we can heal. Really beautiful idea, this amazing region within you. So psychedelics is really swimming in the imaginal, right? It's what Terence McKenna calls a species of existence, of experience, or a species of experience that for a long time has been denied by science. The experience of the inner realm, or synchronicities, or any intuition, all of these things, right? And we're seeing this now at the forefront of psilocybin therapy. If you think of what psilocybin therapy is, you've got your eyes closed, and they're just like, okay, off you go, take off, and you go into the imaginal realm, and you experience those archetypal, those soulful images, and they become the material that you work with in psilocybin therapy. Dream images, visions, messengers. Actually, etymologically, the word messenger is a direct translation. The word angel originally means messenger. So psilocybin therapy. I was talking about the good, the true, and the beautiful earlier. When we meditate on love, we draw love into our lives. This is the principle of metta, loving kindness in Buddhism. When we meditate on love, we draw love into our lives. When we meditate on beauty, we draw beauty into our lives. We welcome it. We cultivate it in our consciousness. And this is at the centre of science, I would say, because the history of the big scientific discoveries is replete with pregnant images and visions that scientists have from the imaginal realm. They don't know why they got it, where it came from, and it guides and it motivates their work. Science is called into being by these pregnant and mysterious emanations from the Imaginarium. Okay, Einstein. I maintain that cosmic religious feeling is the strongest and noblest incitement to scientific research. Religious feeling takes the form of rapturous amazement at the harmony of natural law. Cosmic religious feeling. So this is not just a mode of cognition, this is a magical and an alchemical encungement of a world that is imagining itself into being. When I talk about the psyche, I'm not talking about this in here. I consider all of creation to be the dance of the imaginal. I'm gonna substantiate that idea a bit later in this talk. A world that is imagining itself into being. So this science has a very long history. Entheogens, godly substances, have go right back into prehistory, of course. Absolutely fundamental to the human experience, fundamental to the history of mysticism, and the tradition that I've been studying, mystical poetry. It's very closely connected to that philosophy. The idea that these medicines are sacraments, which is to say that they're sacred. Sacred is, again, one of those quite inaccessible words, which is basically just to say that it is worthy of our devotion, it's worthy of our praise, a word related to prayer, prize and price. It's sacred, it has value. Entheogens, very closely related to all wisdom traditions, and these wisdom traditions give these medicines a container through which they can be discussed, they can be responsibly used, and also a container that prevents against some of the shadow sides of, this, of these entheogens, such as psychedelic narcissism, bearded guys with hats on filming themselves and talking for a very long time, or whatever, right? Escapism, yeah, pure hedonism, madness, okay? These wisdom traditions have been working for a very long time with entheogens to mitigate against these shadows. So psychedelics invite us into the imaginal realm, and they bring flux, and they disrupt, and they invite us to reapprehend the bejeweled flux of a cosmos that is adorned with galactic chandeliers. And they invite us to reconceive this convulsive green epiphany of summer and spring, and they invite us to become active players in the animacies of the deep psyche that are directing our lives. And we all know this, because if we've ever been to therapy, or we've ever meditated, or been we've ever spent long enough, actually, these deep down intentions, these animacies are directing our lives. Psychedelics bring us here. They give us a toolkit through which we can very quickly start to work with these things. I've been talking for quite a long time, and I'm going to carry on talking for a long time. So maybe for my sake and for your sake, maybe we could just stand up again, and once if you feel comfortable to do so, and then as you breathe in, bring your hands up above you, and as you exhale, bringing them down and nestling them in the groin of the person next to you. Great. And just shake your hands out, and maybe if you want to, just shake your feet out. Okay, great. Cool. Wonderful. Hopefully, what I've learned as a teacher is this will optimise your cognition and make you better able to learn. More blood, more oxygen in your brain. Okay, cool. I'm now going to talk about some of my favourite psychedelic substances: mushrooms, trees, flowers, and springtime. I'm going to start with mushrooms. Mushrooms, of course, are fruiting bodies of an underground mycelial network. Some of these mycelial networks are the biggest living organisms that we know of on the planet today. They're superorganisms, sometimes thousands of kilometres wide, and they're a form of electrochemical cognition that are linking the neuronal material in the root tips of trees and plants, okay? So they actually have neurons in the tips of roots and trees, and it's the mycelium that is connecting them all. Incredible level of intelligence we don't really understand. Some scientists, and this is research here at Bristol University, sometimes scientists believe that the linguistic culture, this communicative culture of this electrochemical cognition, is more the language of this cognition, the way that they're communicating with these rhythmic pulses, these different intensities and tones, if you like, is more complex than human language. It's deeply mysterious, it's deeply poetical, and it's deeply mystical, I would say. My theory is that mushrooms, psychedelic mushrooms, are a way that what McKenna called the Gaian mind is infiltrating our species. It's a form of agency through which this superorganism is infiltrating other bits of the ecosystem of which we are a part. They're infiltrating, they're making an intervention. They're part, this relationship, this ancient relationship, and there's lots of people would say that going back right to the Vedas many thousands of years in the Indian subcontinent, that mushrooms were part of the birth of all of these civilizations and religious systems. They're part of human cognition. They're part of the ecosystem of the human mind. The philosopher Biokumalafe is an animist, a neo-animist, and he says that we have to think about all of these physical and ecological systems and entities as having agency. Okay, let's have a look at the agency of mushrooms. There's perhaps no living system with more agency in the history of our planet than fungus. It was mushrooms that demineralized the rock. Before we had plant life on terra firma, it was the mushrooms that demineralized the rock to create the mud that the plants could come out of the sea and live on. When the plants arrived, the first chlorophyllc life were taught to have roots by the mycelium. The fungus taught them, teased, sung the roots out of the plants. We have plant life to thank for, we have fungus to thank for plant life, and today still the mycelium is gardening the ecosystem above soil. It's deciding which species live and die for its own benefit, and then it sends up these fruiting bodies, and the spores of these mushrooms go off into the air. Many of them go off into the stratosphere, and one of the principal methods through which we get the droplet formation, which enables us to have clouds. Okay, these spores go up, there's untold trillions of them in the stratosphere, water coagulates around them, creates clouds. So the fungus is gardening the rain. It's orchestrating the whole symphony of the water cycle. The aquatic cycle comes down in the form of rain, creates more outbursts of mushrooms. What the fuck is going on with this organism, right? Really, really fascinating. The agency of mushrooms. Now, there is a tendency to turn this into a drug or a human, or to patent it or say this is a drug, it's in my little Sealy bag. Does the fungus, does the mycelium cease to have agency the moment we pick it up and we call it a drug and we put it in a Sealy bag? Is it not still making an intervention in the ecosystem, which is as much psychic as it is physical, because we are psychic beings as much as we're physical beings after all. So what is happening with mushrooms? What the fuck are they doing to us? What are they decomposing? What are they decomposing? What are they recomposing? Why is this renaissance happening now? Perhaps this is not these drugs, and I have many spiritual friends who are like, no, psychedelics are bypassing wisdom traditions, and they're a shortcut, and they shouldn't be touched. Or perhaps these medicines are precise responses from an infinitely inventive biosphere to address disequilibrium and illness. Maybe there's some sort of logic in the Gaian mind to what's happening. Maybe the pairing of psilocybin to the modern Western civilization or to humanity itself is part of Gaia's repertoire of interventions to the chronic distraction and boredom and ill health that we're experiencing, and this pathology, this way that we're living, which is tearing holes in the biosphere and creating this ecological crisis, this meaning crisis, all of the things that we're experiencing now. Mushrooms. Wow. Trees. Now I'm going to move on to yay! Trees. One of my favourite things. I've been smoking a lot of DMT in the last couple of years. Now I can't look at trees in the same way. Anyone who's ever bimbled around on magic mushrooms and come across an oak tree will re-see that oak tree and will be in a state of reverence and awe. And you're captivated, are you not, by its slow upward fluidity and the grace and the sentience of its eldership. A tree is a giant architecture of praise. Incredible. At Green Gathering this year, we did a 300-person absurd devotional tree ceremony around an oak tree. We had a 300-person hokey-cokey around a tree. We flirted with the tree. We twerked to the tree. We sang "It's a Tree" by John Lennon. It was beautiful. I could wax poetic about trees for a very long time. I believe that trees are one of the best things that terra firma has said to the firmament. that trees are one of the most spectacular thing that the land has said to the great above. Psychedelics help us see that. It's not just an inanimate object that you put a bit of Harris fencing in front of you. It's a 5-century-old pagan deity, and worthy of praise and reverence and communion even, right? So psychedelics help us do that. They help modulate our relationship with trees and other things. They bring us into a poetic relationship with the natural world around us. They facilitate ecstatic encounter, unitive bliss. They dissolve our selfhood, and our selfhood sometimes somehow gets mangled up with the tree itself. They facilitate what Viveki calls a sympathetic opening, an opening up and into and cross-spilling with the world around us. This is fundamental to what love is. A reciprocal opening with the more than human world. And psychedelics, I would also add, are inherently religious. And I say this in the context of a very secular society. I think that we should be making psychedelics weird again. I think we should be making psychedelics woo again. I think they're fundamentally woo. They're fundamentally weird. It's great that we've got these medical applications. We need to get more woo. Just a little point I want to make. I'm big into the romantic poetry. If anybody's into romantic, nobody's really into poetry, but you probably know. It's just me sat over here on my little fucking Dharma stool. Nobody's really, but you probably know a little bit about the Romantics. It was I describe the Romantic period as one of humanity's initial reactions against industrialism. Okay, it was a psychological, artistic reaction against the destruction and the changes that occurred because of the Industrial Revolution. And here in Bristol, you had poets like Coleridge and Southby, who were part of the Pneumatic Society. Pneumatic Society is a direct precursor of the Psychedelic Society. They would get together, poets, scientists, writers, intellectuals, and they would create little kind of like telephone box chambers, fill it with nitrous oxide, walk in, get really, really high, come out, talk about it, write stuff. Yeah. Nos calendars in Bristol have a very long history. Coleridge lived in with Southby in an artistic commune in Park Street. So the Pneumatic Society, so this history of artistic, psychedelic renderings of philosophical inquiry. Coleridge was into psychedelics. He was not only taking nitrous oxide, he was also into opium as well. Famously, he was an addict. Don't really know where I'm going with this. Oh yeah, that was it. So Coleridge talked about dim analogies, and he said that in nature, in what we observe, we find analogies with our inner realm, with our moral, with our ethical, with our own self. Okay, there's a correspondence, and that's why we have art. We see correspondences with the outside world and our inner world, and we find congruence with the more than human world. So I want to kind of amplify this idea of beauty in psychedelics. Frank Wilczek is an award-winning physicist, astrophysicist. He's a person who's most recently developed our understanding of dark matter. And he very famously said, we need to be thinking of the universe as an artistic creation. And if there is a God, we need to be thinking of the God as an artist. Okay, and art is one of those great ways that we can kind of see into these things. Wordsworth, who's a contemporary of Coleridge, wasn't into drugs at all, but found a different route into psychedelic experience, and this is self-evident in his poetry. I'm going to read a bit of Wordsworth to you now, because any opportunity to read Wordsworth should always be taken.
It's worth the words.
It's worth the words, thank you. I'm not going to try one of these silly accents this time. Coming in revelation, I conversed with things that really are. I, at this time, saw blessings spread around me like a sea. From nature and her overflowing soul, I had received so much that all my thoughts were steeped in feeling. I was only then contented when, with bliss ineffable, I felt the sentiment of being, capital B, spread over all that moves and all that seemeth still, over all that lost beyond the reach of thought, and human knowledge to the human eye invisible, yet liveth to the heart, over all that leaps and runs and shouts and sings, or beats the gladsome air, over all that glides beneath the wave, yea, in the wave itself, and mighty depths of waters. Wonder not if such my transports were, for in all things I saw one life, and felt that it was joy. Tripping balls. Wordsworth was tripping balls. Poetry is, this type of poetry is stuff that I think could more accompany the psychedelic experience, the psychedelic space. Maybe not poetry that Wordsworth, maybe poetry that you've written. Schopenhauer had this idea of will. He was a philosopher. He said that all of creation is infused and suffused by a will, capital W, that is driving all physical and psychic, that is to say mental phenomena. And we see this in the dissipative surges of Qi, we see this in the spontaneous outsprawlments of the Tao. Will, driving everything forward in this constant fluxative outfoldment of creation, which is in constant flux and constant change. We see Schopenhauer's will. We see a tree trunk fall to the earth and get consumed by the revelrous grief of fungus. We see Schopenhauer's will. When we see a tree grow out and vaulting, we see a tree vaulting into the air. It's like we see Coleridge's dim analogies. It's like a vaulting longing. We're experiencing that longing, that reaching for the above. Schopenhauer's will. Existence is tripping balls. And I cannot speak here of anything so mundane as art or psychedelics when we're sat in a farm that has creatures with 4 legs covered in hair and horns growing out of their skulls. What the fuck is going on? These creatures are related to us. Nature is psychedelic. Nature is this weird creative outsprawlment. Nature is tripping balls. Springtime is the next subject I'd like to talk about. Springtime! Okay, for me, springtime is it's an interesting time for artists. It's a kind of quickening. It's an interesting time for all of us, right? For me, it feels orgiastic and it feels revelrous, springtime. When you see wild garlic spill out of the earth, for me, it's kind of like a form of laughter. And I invite you to just dilate your categorizations, the way that you conceive of these things. If you'll allow me to wax poetic in this way. Is wild garlic not a form of laughter? Okay, just for a moment. And ivy is another. Ivy in spring. If it's an ivy in springtime, it has a particular kind of really wet, translucent quality to it. It's a bright, wet, promiscuous. It's like an erotic promiscuity as it fingers its way up your fences and up your walls. It's disgusting. It's orgiastic. Springtime is orgiastic. And yes, I'm being poetic, and yes, I'm being fanciful, but maybe I'm not saying anything useful about the nature of phenomena or spring. But what is the truth of spring? What is most real about spring? Now, we could say it's a period of renewed growth and fertility after a period of low light and low temperature. Or we could say it's an orgy. We could say it's a moment when trees spaff their loads and horny birds fall about themselves in song. Is this not a great rejoicing? Is this not a time of music and revelry? I think it is. You might say, Pete, you're projecting human feelings onto a world that doesn't have human feelings. Or maybe what I'm doing is articulating my experience, which is the only thing I'm qualified to actually articulate. I mean, I'm articulating my experience of spring, of which I am a part, because spring happens in here, right? Spring happens in here also. In the only way I'm qualified to do, through my subjective experience. So this poetic rendering of our relationship, of our love, of beauty, and the more than human world is not only valid, I think, I would also posit that it may be optimal method of perceiving and conceiving of the world around us. When we're in spring, we see a world that is in flow. When we are in flow, we are at our most vivid. When we're in a flow state, we're at our most vivid, and we're most alive, and we're most connected. And that is true also of spring. And we go outside of ourselves, and we enter into a kinship with the living planet around us. And we see everywhere seething. We see a world that is seething with meaning and relatability. Meaning and relatability. Meaning and relatability. When we take psychedelics, suddenly the world has meaning and relatability. It's not just you're not just getting from A to B. You're not just doing your shit. You're not just ticking off your to-do lists. It's a meaning and relatability. Look at that tree. Wow, it's in a bar. Isn't it beautiful, the quality of the light at the moment? Meaning and relatability. And that's not far-fetched for us, as in, to quote Wordsworth, to see into the life of things. To see into the life of things. Because we are, after all, distantly related to all of these phenomena. Okay, we all came from the same fungus. We all came from the same demineralized rock. We all are reveling in the sun. We're all bathing in the sun. We're all praising the sun. We all came here to fuck and to kill and to survive and to love and to die. We all came here to be part of this great unending epiphany, of new. And the eternal cause of beauty. If you're here for the eternal cause of beauty, say aye. Aye. You have to think about that one for a moment. If you're here for the eternal cause of beauty, say aye. Aye. Amazing, good. Just checking. So Blake talked about the divine arts of the imagination. The divine arts of the imagination. And if you think about it, the entire cosmos is imagination, creativity, and play. And what lasts eternally in a cosmos of phenomena that are perpetually arising and passing away is imagination, creativity, and play. Blake's divine arts of the imagination. The coiled tendril is the pinnacle of God's imagination. The chuckle in the baby, the laugh in the child, is a symptom of this fermenting play of the divine imagination as it convulses all about us. I'd like now to talk about flowers. Hey, flowers. So what is it about flowers and our relationship, and the relationship between flowers and love? Very interesting, very ancient idea. Flowers give us a symbolism. They take extra importance when we're in love. When we are in love, we spill into the life of the world. We are besides ourselves. We are outside of ourselves. We are diminished, but we're gladly diminished because we're merging with maybe somebody or something, or all forms of love are a form of merging, psychedelic, actually kind of like dissolving yourself and becoming part of the greater self. We're in a state of reverence, we're in a state of wonder, we're in a state of devotion, and we're in a state of madness. And then we come across flowers. And we see in the flower something that adequately expresses what's going on inside of us. And we see in the flower an outspilling of beauty that we are experiencing. I wrote a little bit about flowers here. If you'll indulge me, I'll just read this out. I am, says the flower. I open only for sun. Insects rub your abdomens on my genitalia. I am nature at her most vivid. Look at the dress I am wearing. I love, I fuck, I flower, I avail myself for a limited period. I beauty, for this I came. I've stolen many flowers whilst I've been in love from people's front gardens here in Bristol. If that garden was your front garden, I apologise. If you were the recipient of those flowers, I also apologise. Where am I going with this? Am I just saying a number of flowery things? Am I actually saying anything of significance about the nature of reality? I was talking earlier about the word psyche, capital P. I believe that midwives are, that psychedelics are midwives to the psyche. Now we know this because we know that the word psychedelic means mind manifesting, mind revealing itself. But it's not just revealing what's happening in here, it's revealing the great dance of the psyche, capital P. Psyche is an ancient Greek word. The Greeks believed that the psyche was not something happening in here, but was swirling and eddying all about us. It was the animating principle, animating the material world with logos, with meaning and form. Has anybody ever heard of the word panpsychism before? Put your hands up if you've heard of that term. Okay, it's a bit of an obscure term. It is a new term in physics to describe the cosmos as being essentially an event of consciousness. The idea that creation is fundamentally a mental event, and that consciousness is not a byproduct of the universe, and it's certainly not something that originated in human prefrontal cortexes, but rather consciousness is fundamental, and the prefrontal cortex of humans emerged from a conscious universe in the same way that an orange emerges from a tree. It's linked to animism, it's linked to Hinduism and other pagan traditions. This idea that the universe is sentient and it's intelligible, and whether that's a weather system or the turning of magma, all of these things can be seen as the reception and the transmission of data, flows of information. Even at the most fundamental level, you have particles which have a situational awareness of other electrons around them. So germinal consciousness, panpsychism. John Vervaeke argues that the cosmos behaves in the same way as a mind. The cosmos is like a mind. It's multidimensional, it's highly complex, self-regulating interface that evolves over time. Perhaps our mind that has emerged out of this cosmos works in exactly the same way. Man, it's really exhausting talking for such a long time about these subjects. But also really, really fun. I'm really glad to be here. Are you having a nice time, guys?
Yes.
Good. So these flows of intelligibility, we can see this in evolution. Evolution has been described as a form of active intelligence, and it complexifies over time. It's explorative, it's creative, it embellishes and imagines. So evolution started, at least with the Big Bang, with light. Light turns into dust. Dust turns into particles. Particles turn into gas clouds. Gas clouds form supernovas. Supernovas explode, create new atomic compounds and metals. New atomic ecologies. Atomic ecologies evolving over time. Atomic ecologies evolve into molecular ecologies. Molecular ecologies evolve into cellular life, fungus, plants, etc., etc., etc. I've missed a few things out, but that's basically everything that's happened. The grammar of cognition is conforming to the grammar of reality, says John Vervaeke. The grammar of cognition is conforming to the grammar of reality, what Huxley calls the mind at large, panpsychism. And we see this complexification of the cosmos can also be seen as a complexification of consciousness, because it is a dynamic unfoldment of imagination, those eternal things, imagination, creativity and play. Amen. Imagination, creativity, and play. So I'm coming to the end of this talk now, guys. Finally, it's fucking exhausting. I really love this. I'm really animated. It's a real honour for me to be able to share my research with you. I get up at 4 a.m. and I'm transcribing mystic poetry. I have a very lonely life. It's really lovely when I get to come out and share my research and when I do talks like this. So I just wanted to share that excitement with you. So Mark Vernon, who is a friend of Rupert Sheldrake, has made a beautiful. He's got a podcast on Spotify, which I recommend checking out if you're into any of this. And he says he's got one on psychedelics, and he said that belying the psychedelic renaissance is something much bigger, and that is a spiritual renaissance. He talks about the Roaring Twenties. He says actually maybe the Roaring Twenties is going to be about a spiritual renaissance rather than a psychedelic renaissance. Psychedelics are inescapably woo. They're inescapably woo. If you even take the word recreational drugs, recreation, the original usage of that word recreation means spiritual and emotional consolidation, spiritual remaking, the process of playing, the process of giving one's attention in a flow state to something, the creation of the activity of recreation is a way in which we reciprocally open with the world around us in a devotional way, with rapture, with wonder, with enthusiasm. Okay, so we're dissolving the self with recreation, and there's a generosity to this activity in both directions. There's a loving kindness. Psychedelics are inherently wisdom giving because they're infused with this love of beauty, with the good, the true, and the beautiful. Because they call us towards beauty, and they call us towards a loving relationship with the world around us. They are inherently inclined towards wisdom. And when I talk of wisdom, of course, I'm not talking about information, intelligence, or knowledge. I'm talking about something which takes all of those things and inflects it with compassion and ethics and morality. Wisdom is about right relationship. Somebody once said that knowledge is about knowing that a tomato is not a fruit. Wisdom is about knowing that you don't put a tomato in a fruit salad. Does that make sense? Have I got that right?
It is a fruit.
It is a fruit. Okay, let me rephrase that. Knowledge is about knowing that a tomato is a fruit. Wisdom is about knowing that you don't put it in a fruit salad. Is that clear? I don't want anybody messing up dinner tomorrow. Little rabbit hole on wisdom. So psychedelics give us a gateway to the imaginal. They're ways that the imaginal... I don't want to suggest here that actually we can only get into the imaginal with psychedelics, because of course that's not true. We're always in the imaginal. We're always in language. We're always in thought. We can't really escape the imaginal.
Yeah.
What they do give us is a tool through which we can artistically engage with the imaginal realm. And I'm riffing here again on the Buddhist teacher Rob Babaya, whose entire soul-making dharma is based on an artistic and a creativity and a creative engagement with the imaginal realm. If you want an actual physical, somatic, a practical toolkit to take everything I'm saying and actually over years of your life turn this into a reality that is a workable thing and part of your life on a daily basis, find Rob Babaya, Burbea. Rob Babaya's got 500 hours of stuff online and has an entire toolkit for going into the imaginal as a tool of soulcraft. Incredible teacher. So artistic engagement with the imaginal realm, reconditioning our psyche. Wheresoever you turn your head, there is the face of the divine imagination. Wheresoever you turn your head, there is the face of the divine imagination. I'm changing this quote from the Quran. The original one is God. Wheresoever you turn your head, there is the face of God. God is a contaminated word. Hopefully, divine imagination is something that we can all own a bit more. I don't think it's inappropriate to be using the word God in the psychedelic space. Sometimes I feel quite sad that the people on the podium are not talking about God. They're talking about their research because they're the people who get funding to do psilocybin therapy. I think we should be talking more about God when it comes to psychedelics. I think we should make psychedelics woo again. I think we should make psychedelics weird again. So to conclude, I'm not saying anything new. Everything I've said here is not my idea. It's been said many times by mystics over the millennia. Milarepa, Kabir, Rumi, Hafez, Laldead, the list goes on. St. John of the Cross, Blake, Wordsworth, Coleridge, all of these people. If we leave out psychedelics from the psychedelic space, if we leave out the woo from psychedelics, we're severing ourselves from a very, very rich tradition. So let's make psychedelics weird again. Let's munch upon mushrooms. Let's magnet hug oak trees. Let's sing about our dreams as the dream sings about us. That's my suggestion. We could do it this weekend if you wanted. Why? Why should we do that? 4 reasons that I've got conveniently listed in front of me. Number 1, because psychedelics are not just fun, they're not just medicinal, they're not just about optimizing our consciousness, they're connecting us to the deeper architecture of creation. Beautiful phrase. The deeper architecture. I'm quoting Joshua Shree of the Emerald podcast. The deeper architecture of creation, the psyche incarnate, the great dance of the self-creating self, as it imagines itself into being. This is much bigger. Number 4 of the psychedelic renaissance, mystical inquiry. Number 2, psychedelics help us to restore balance. Entheogens are inheritances from the more than human world. They are forms of agency from the more than human world. And when we receive these medicines, we are, I believe, being reimagined by the Gaian mind. We're being reimagined by the Gaian mind through these medicines, okay, and they're dissolving something. They're dissolving and they're decomposing that sclerotic fixity of patriarchal capitalism with its rigid hierarchies, its extractivist mentalities, and the way that it objectifies and seizes upon the flesh of Gaia in a way that is causing so much destruction. I believe that psychedelics can help decompose and recompose the habits of mind that are at the roots of capitalism and are causing so much destruction. Number 3, psychedelics exist to make things weird. They are all about the mysterium. They're all about the ever-receding horizon of knowledge, the ever-receding horizon of meaning. They're more poetic than anything else, I think. It's not, you don't take psychedelics and you go, oh, I've got it, and now I understand the truth. It's not really about that. I think actually what they do, I think the real inheritance of psychedelic may not be enlightenment, but may actually be mystifying things, actually shrouding, helping us to fall back in love with the ever-receding horizon, helping us to have reverence and wonder and to search and to go out and to be curious. Number 4, this is the last point here, I think that we should intentionally engage with psychedelics to participate in the imaginal realm as it bodies forth the entire living fabric of creation. The imaginal realm anyway is bodying forth, to quote Shakespeare, the entire living fabric of creation. So let's intentionally engage with that. Let's go into that and remake ourselves, not just because it's something that's good for our health, as the wellness industry would like us to believe, but because it's good, it's the right thing to do. And we need to do it not just for ourselves, but for all the people around us in this mental health epidemic, in this loneliness epidemic, and in the desecration of our living home. So let's intentionally go through the imaginal realm and try to access the source code of existence as it manifests all about us. Let's recompose the intentional grammar, not just of ourselves and our inner world, the intentional grammar of creation itself. That's why we're here. That's why we're here in this great imaginative unfoldment. What the fuck otherwise are we doing here? We're clinging to an encrusted lump of magma that is spiraling through deep space for no apparent reason. Let's take drugs. Let's do it on a Monday. Let's not go to work. Let's do it in a responsible fashion and not if we have schizotypal tendencies. Let's transform consciousness. Let's not do it for ourselves. Let's do it for the mind at large. What I am advocating for is this: a radical engagement with the imaginal endeavours of beauty, dream and symbolism through which existence is composed. A radical engagement with the imaginal endeavours of beauty, dream and symbolism through which existence is composed. It is time to recover the imaginal health of our sensorium, our society and our world. The imaginal health of our world. I think that's a good note to end on. Thank you for listening. Thank you.